Hello and welcome to Unprofessional Engineering. My name is James.
And you got Luke.
Luke, taking one from a write-in, actually, that came in a long time ago.
It did?
Yeah.
Okay.
And for some reason, we pushed it off again. We're taking a look at controlled demolition and how it works.
I messed up.
Why?
I watched the movie Demolition Man.
I know you like videos for your research, but
With,
come on, man.
Was that Wesley Snipes?
Yeah, what's Demolition Man about?
I think it's Wesley Snipes.
quick recap
and what's Wesley Snipes and Arnold Schwarzenegger, and like Wesley Snipes gets frozen, and so does Arnold Schwarzenegger, and
Oh, it's Terminator.
then they
Blade.
unfreeze. It was a really terrible movie. It was terrible. Sandra Bullock. Yeah, it was
Isn't Denzel in
Rob
Blade?
Schneider.
Rob Schneider's in it?
Rob
Okay,
Schneider.
let's move on.
It's a terrible movie.
Controlled demolition refers to the demolition of a building or structure, like a bridge, by means of explosives. So the cool way to take something down, right? So demolition using explosives, sometimes called an implosion, ensures the strategic collapse of a building or structure by placing explosive materials in predetermined locations. That way you can blow things up in sequence and then let gravity do the rest to drop the building or bridge, or apparently things like water towers and chimneys are a big one as well.
I always wondered, and I never knew until we did the research, like I've seen some of those implosions that they do on TV, and I always wondered why it went like pow, 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 like it went around like in a circle
What does
rather
it
than
do?
like pow, 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 pow.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Like, yeah, exactly. I always wondered why they didn't all just happen at one time, and apparently, like you said, there's a ton of like engineering involved with this.
Yeah. We would not be good at this job.
No, because I'm not good at engineering. But basically, they have to find all of like these major structural supports in these buildings, and if you blow this one first before this one, it's going to fall that way on the orphanage. And if you do this one first versus that one, it'll fall this way into the wide open field. So apparently, there's a whole bunch of like calculation and engineering that goes into blowing up buildings. I just assume they just like put a whole bunch of dynamite wrapped around the bottom and just
The guy that like pushes down.
from like the old cartoons.
Yeah.
that's
Wile E. Coyote did that all
I
the
just
time.
assumed that's what they did.
I think it's probably pretty close to
Yeah.
that. We'll get into it a little bit more here, though. So when do you use controlled demolition? I feel like all the time should
Oh
be
my
the
goodness!
answer,
If
right?
if it was up to me, I would control demolition everything, like trees, my grass.
Man, if you could control demolition your grass, I'd be so happy.
Yeah.
Ugh. But actually, you usually use it for really tall buildings. So not like maybe a 5-story, but like a 20 or a 40-story building.
Mm-hmm.
Blow that sucker up. Bridges, chimney stacks apparently are a big pain, as well as cooling towers.
And do you know why they do it?
Why, Luke?
Well, number one, so first of all, there's a little bit of a safety thing. It's super fast. It happens in seconds. But also, having workers try to do this themselves and like be involved and around it, it can be dangerous. Also, it can be super expensive and time consuming, because if you think like one of those smokestacks, you literally have to start at the top and literally like do big circles working your way down. I mean, it would take forever to do this. So the cost that it takes, the time, the safety, there's all kinds of reasons. And you got to look at the surrounding area. So if you're too close to other buildings, you can't do it. So all kinds of things you need to look into.
So it saves a lot of time, and it can save a lot of money as well. I always thought, well, you're using all this explosives and trying to figure it all out. But like you said, it takes so long, and you have to be so careful tearing this stuff down. It can actually save you a lot of money as well. So the use of it, like you said, it depends a lot on the surrounding area. And it also, not just like the residents and buildings around it, but also the wildlife.
So I have a fun fact I was reading.
I saw you laughing, and I was like, uh-oh, I don't know what's going on here.
Fun fact, one of the earliest documented attempts at building implosions was in 1773. And this was the Holy Trinity Cathedral in Waterford, Ireland. Waterford Crystal, so if you know Crystal, in Ireland. And they put 150 pounds of gunpowder and basically blew the building to absolute smithereens. So could you imagine being the guys? It's like, okay, so how much? I don't know, like 150 pounds?
Like, look their thumb, they're like
Like literally,
yeah.
I mean, 150 pounds of gunpowder is probably, I don't know, like a big case like that.
Yeah, barrel.
Yeah. So they basically
Do
threw
you
this.
think they did like they left a little trail of gunpowder then and lit that on fire and then?
I guarantee they did something like that, right? Or maybe they shot an arrow, like a flaming arrow into it. Because there's no, I guarantee you there wasn't like wick or any electronics. Obviously,
They could have had wick back then.
you think?
I think so.
That would
Not
work?
electronics, but I don't know. I feel like the trail of gunpowder couldn't be real reliable.
I feel like
right?
I feel like my research. I should have figured that out. So
I think that's very
how
interesting.
cool is that?
though. Yeah,
I just thought that was
super
funny.
cool.
Like 150,
And it's just gone.
Yeah.
So we'll get into some of the implosions that have happened later on here, but I kind of went down the rabbit hole on watching those videos.
Yeah, they're
and
fun.
there's one like things gone wrong, and it's just this chunk of cement that comes flying past everybody's head. Like any one of them watching would have been just all the dead.
Yeah.
if that would have touched.
Oh,
them.
there's
Oh, my goodness.
accounts of people, getting hit with debris and getting killed, and debris being, miles away if they don't do it correctly. So
they figure out an area that they think is going to be safe, but there's actually implosion enthusiasts that are stupid enough to try and like jump the fence and get past security to get a closer view of this thing blowing up. If you do that, you deserve hit with a chunk of concrete. Boom, because you're a blockhead already.
Oh, look at you. You're so funny sometimes.
Yeah, okay. So how does this stuff really work? Let's get into that. So in order to demolish a building safely, blasters must map out each element of the implosion ahead of time, and there's a lot of steps that go into this. So the first step is to examine the architectural blueprints of the building to determine how it's put together. And you go on, if you're reading about this stuff, or I assume you watched videos on this, I don't know.
Yep.
But there are only a handful of companies that do this. It's super risky. It's not like it's really scientific yet. It's kind of, you've learned by doing it. It's a
bit of an art form.
Yeah, it's knowledge passed down. So there's only a few people that do this, and they say like every building is different because every support's built differently, and there's different ways to implode all of these. Even it's not always like the way I did it's right. You could do it a number of ways.
Yeah.
But then also you have to go not just through the blueprints, but you have to walk through the building because oftentimes, things have been added there, structural supports and walls and different stuff like that. So next, the blaster crew tours the building a whole bunch of time, jotting down notes and figuring out where all of the support structures are on each floor. So you have to go through every floor of this stupid building, finding all of the support structures. So if this is like a 40-story building, this is going to take a long time.
It takes a while.
So they decide what explosives to use, and I think you have a bit about different kind of explosives and whatnot. I have a little bit about that as well. And then it's time to figure out how they're going to time their detonations. So in some cases, the blasters might actually develop a 3D model and see if the structure or how the structure is going to blow up in the virtual world.
Could you imagine what that simulation would look like?
It must take forever to run.
Blowing up and starting to fall and then blowing up. Oh, that would be an awesome simulation.
I don't know why they wouldn't do that every time.
Yeah.
At least not for anything big.
Yeah. Well, one of the videos I saw, it wasn't a famous one. This tower fell down and hit this building beside, and it's like, yeah, you could have analyzed that.
Yeah. You really could have.
Yeah.
The ones that fall, or the ones that fall and then roll into another building.
Yeah.
Ugh. So the main challenge is bringing the building down and controlling the way it falls.
Yeah.
Or
typically,
straight down
is what they want to do. Typically.
Right. So ideally, a blasting crew is going to be able to tumble the building over one of the sides. So in your tear jerking, example, we don't want it to fall onto the orphanage. We want it to fall over into this field where there's only cows that are going to get crushed.
Who cares about the animals?
Right. It's not nice, Luke. Jeez. You're going to have PETA on us again. We almost got shut down last time you started this.
We did.
So you want to have it fall in a specific direction. So that sort of thing, getting it to drop, is the easiest way to execute, and it's generally the safest because it's kind of like tipping a building is like chopping a tree.
Yeah.
So if you've ever cut down a tree, and I've only done, relatively small trees.
I've done a lot.
Have you?
A lot of big ones, too.
You kind of notch it in the direction you want it to fall. You cut it the other way, and it falls down through that notch. So the same thing with a building. You first blow up the supports in the direction that you want the building to fall, and then it either falls or you have to do a little bit more explosion, but it's already weakened in that direction.
Yeah.
And then it will fall the way you want it to go. But sometimes they actually, connect steel cables, kind of like you tying a rope around your tree or something and like pulling that direction. They might do that with backhoes and whatever else to make sure that it crumbles and falls that direction. Now, before we get into actually making it fall in on itself, let's take a break for a word from our sponsor.
I have nothing. Normally I have some kind of funny about, our sponsor is funny, this person.
I was hoping it would be hughesandsalvage.co.uk.
I saw those cats.
Yeah, but they didn't pay for this.
That's all right.
Bunch of jerks. That's okay. I thought they did a good job of writing up all this stuff for me to steal.
But I'm sure we do have some shout-outs.
We have some shout-outs, yes. Number 1, Suman B. So this is interesting because it's actually giving a shout-out in the shout-out.
What?
So they'd like to give a shout-out to a friend, Tyler L., who got him listening to the show. Shout-outs and shout-outs.
Nice.
Boom. So double shout-out to the two of you.
Way to go, Suman.
And then another shout-out, Michelle C. Longtime listener, super fan of the show. I just learned a taco-making expert.
Michelle.
Yes,
That Michelle,
yes.
okay.
And came up with the great topic of unlikely places where the ideas for inventions came from. She gave me an example or two as well.
Okay.
I said, I love that, but Luke's going to actually have to do some work, and he is allergic.
And the worst at the works.
You really are.
Yeah.
That's okay. So if you would like some stickers like these fine folks are going to get,
Thanks, Michelle.
email us at unprofessionalengineering@gmail.com.
And make sure you subscribe.
Oh, yeah,
Make sure you give us
subscribe.
some sweet 5-star reviews.
So many reviews.
It
It was 99 last I looked. I know, so close.
James said something about iTunes is going away. I don't know if that's like the truth or not the truth. Wherever you
that's the
listen,
rumor.
subscribe, rate it, share it, listen
All
in the
that
car.
jazz. Listen in the car. A lot of
Yeah.
people listen in the car
They
on their
should.
way to work or school or things like that. Well, another thing, head over to unprofessionalengineering.com. On the front and center page, there's a big picture that says, vote for us for the Pittsburgh's best local podcast. All you have to do is click that image. It will take you to a place to vote for us. And that would be awesome if you did so. It ends July 7th,
And if
so
we
get on it.
And if we win, we get, I think, nothing, basically.
I assume they'll just name a building after us in Pittsburgh.
Ooh, that's interesting. Would your name be first or last?
I think it would be the Unprofessional Engineering
Oh,
Building.
it wouldn't be the Herzing
No,
Mahelsik building.
No, it would just be Unprofessional Engineering Building, which no one
Okay.
would then want to occupy.
Could be H&M, like the store.
Oh, that would not confuse anyone. That's a great idea.
H&M.
All right. Well, thanks for writing in all the suggestions and all that jazz. And thank you ahead of time for your votes. Luke, have you even voted yet?
I did.
Did you?
Yeah, from like 4 different computers. Because
doesn't-
it tracks somehow. It knows.
I know. I'll
So
have to do it from
can
my
I do?
iPad.
Can I give a little more detail on the explosions?
If you don't, I'm going to be furious.
Okay, so you kind of did like high level. I want to be like really, really specific on the stages.
Pacific?
Yeah, Pacific. I want to be really Pacific on the stages.
Okay.
Specific.
I want to hear.
So stage 1 is safety. Because safety first. That's our motto. Basically, we both have that tattooed on our backs. Is safety first. Right?
Remember that video you showed me?
Yeah.
Where OSHA would be real angry about that guy's
Yeah.
foot in the molten metal?
Safety first. That's our motto here. So
Yep.
safety first. So basically, you got to fence off the building. You have to make sure that you have all the communication in place. You got to make sure that all your municipal authorities have been contacted,
Wow.
city, state, local government
Yeah.
agencies, all those sorts of people.
Pick up any debris sitting around.
Exactly. Then it's called preparatory dismantling. So preparatory dismantling, you can't just go in and wrap dynamite like around the bottom structure. That might work, but you mentioned before, sometimes there's additional structures, new construction, they add or remove or take things away. So preparatory dismantling is taking out like all interior walls.
Add or remove or take things away.
Or take things away, yeah.
Okay,
Come
just
on.
so I understand.
Stay with me, James. So it's called preparatory dismantling, and basically what they do is they take out as much of the interior non-load bearing walls as possible, any structures that might interfere with, that controlled implosion that we were talking about, of bringing it straight down.
Hold on, I have to give a shout out here.
Shoot.
To, I believe it's How Stuff Works or something like
Okay.
that, where I was reading about this a bit, where they said, in this part where they're looking at the non-load bearing walls and stuff, next, construction crews, or more accurately, destruction crews.
Oh, I see what
And I
they
was
did
just
there.
like, oh, groaner so bad that I need to say it. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Next up is you have to make sure that you install the explosives in the appropriate spots, and typically this is done with they drill holes in the
that's how you
supporting
do
structures,
it.
like basically a giant drill, and they put explosives in the particular locations. They wire up the explosions, and it's all done electronically now. Some of it's actually done via radio waves now, I understand. Is really new.
That's neat.
Then they actually, once it's all wired up, they hit the and then basically the timed explosions happened in certain areas, basically taking away any structural support, typically at the lowest part of the building.
Yeah, like the first floor or two.
Yeah, first floor of the basement. And again, they do it in a specific sequence so that this is going to come as straight down or in the direction that they intend as possible. Then the real job gets in, and that is they have to deal with cleaning this up. So basically, they just hire a boatload of people, lots of dump trucks.
Two guys in a truck.
Yeah,
show
two guys,
up.
big, strong guys like you and I. You
Yep.
know.
Nailed it.
And then they basically have to recycle anything they can recycle, and stuff they can't recycle, they basically just throw it in the landfill and kill the earth.
Yeah, exactly. That could be like fill.
I guess it could be.
Areas.
Yeah.
So a few things here. You mentioned the destruction crews coming through, right, and checking out the non-load bearing walls. They actually take a lot of these out throughout the entire building, because otherwise, once you blow up those lower floors, you might even take some of the main supports out in the higher ones. It stiffens the fall too much, if not, and so the building might stay together.
Yeah,
so if you're trying
it'll be
to
like an accordion. It'll come down, but it'll still be
right,
tall.
yeah, you don't want that. So you have to go through and remove those walls so that it all lets gravity do its work and smashes everything. And then a couple other things, just the different kind of explosions. And this goes into the materials that you were talking about. So for concrete columns, blasters usually use dynamite or something similar to that. And that's because the blaster, to do this, they cram the explosive materials into the holes. How do you do that again? Okay, so after they drill the holes, they put the material in here, and when the explosives are ignited, the outward pressure sends a shock through the column at supersonic speeds and shatters the concrete into tiny chunks, kind of like your barrel of gunpowder example.
Yes.
But what happens, Luke, if you have steel columns instead of concrete? Because it turns out steel's used a lot now.
Yeah, steel doesn't shatter.
Right.
It has a different modulus of elasticity than concrete.
Woo, engineering. So it's a bit more difficult as it's much stronger. So with buildings with steel support structures, blasters usually use a specialized explosive material, and I'm going to just nail this one. Cyclotrimethylentrinitramine.
Yep, nailed it.
Also called RDX for short. So instead of disintegrating the entire column into like those little concrete bits like we were talking about, high velocity pressure slices
like a knife
right through the steel, splitting it in half. So additionally, blasters may ignite dynamite on one of the sides to push it over in that particular direction, but it slices it in half, and then they push it over. Yeah. So they have all these different materials that they use for the different kinds of stuff. Fun fact about RDX-based explosives. Do you want to hear it?
I do.
It expands at a very high rate of speed, up to 27,000 feet per second.
Wow, so like 9 kilometers.
9 kilometers per second.
Yeah.
8,230 meters per second.
That's fast.
That's super fast.
So because these explosions are happening so incredibly fast and they're wrapped around steel columns, they're wrapped around concrete columns, something I realized that they do in some of the preparation for this is they actually take fencing. So after they put the explosive devices like in the concrete or wrap it around, they take like fencing and fabric and they wrap the columns where the explosives are so that whenever they go like big explosion, those big pieces and chunks don't fly out and hit people in the face.
Yeah, I was surprised that they do a ton of things for safety like that, keeping it wrapped, but also a whole lot of setup to make the cleanup easier.
Yeah.
So that it's keeping it all contained. They do extra fencing then in case a piece does get by,
Yeah.
but they keep it all in that one area to help with the cleanup process.
Yeah, because the rest of the building just falls. The explosions is what makes the stuff fly out.
It is really impressive to see when it
I've
actually
seen a couple.
works, right? In real life, or on the videos, on the YouTubes,
Yeah, just the YouTube.
on the Facebooks.
I think I may have seen a bridge. I don't know. I think it was on the YouTubes.
Okay.
I could be getting confused. Real life and virtual life. You know how that is.
Yeah, I know. It's the worst. Before we take another break, one of the things I thought was interesting was to make sure that they don't overload some of the columns or underload some of the columns. The blasters might actually perform a test on some of the columns inside the building where they wrap it for safety, and then they use varying degrees of explosive material, and based on the effectiveness, they determine the minimum explosive charge needed to demolish the columns. That way it isn't too much and blows stuff out. But it's efficient
That
and it
seems reasonable, right?
cost effective. Yeah, and it's safer that way. So it's cool that they go in there and start blowing that stuff up. Blasters perform a final check. Oh, one thing. Apparently they have to press one button with these electric charger thingies. They hold it for a while, and while they're holding that down, it starts to like power up. You know, like and you see the little lights going up until it hits the maximum. And once the charge button has charged enough, you can then press the fire button at the same time, and that's when.
So this is like, you're like, are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure?
Speak now or forever hold your peace.
No, there's a cat over there. Stop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if it was a dog, you wouldn't blow it up, but a cat, yeah, for sure. So that's how that works.
We're going to talk about the explosives after.
Oh, yeah, we are.
Okay.
But let's take a break for this week's Luke's Rant.
Okay, so you know me. I try to keep it related, and I can't on this one, unfortunately. So, but maybe I could. So
let's
basically, don't wear a bike helmet if you're next to an explosive building, because a bike helmet is specifically only for biking. I don't know. I can't keep it related. So bike helmets is my issue. And I don't know if it's an issue or not an issue. So I needed to get a bike helmet for myself. We're going on a vacation next week, and the whole family needs to have helmets. I had a terrible bike crash last week.
We almost lost you.
Almost lost me. Went over the handlebars. I did not have a helmet on. So kids, don't ever do that. It was like my one chance where I had this really bad over the handlebars wreck. And luckily I was able to, my youthful, nimble, ninja-like reflexes, cat-like reflexes to be exact, saved me.
To be exact.
So I just had a little bit of elbow, knee, some foot stuff, but I wasn't wearing a helmet. So this is more of a PSA,
Public service announcement?
Public service announcement. I was trying to think of the right acronym. This is a public service announcement. Wear helmets, kids and adults. Even if you're on a rail-to-trail. I was on a rail-to-trail, and it's like, oh, I don't wear a helmet on a rail-to-trail. What are the chances of wrecking? Well, pretty good. Pretty good with me. Yeah. So it's wear a helmet, kids. But then the problem is helmets are really expensive. I went to go buy a new bike helmet.
How much?
And $155.
Yeah, that's a lot to save your life.
But it's your brain, so that's actually not a lot of money if you think about it in the long run. Saving your brain, I think it's a good investment. So
I agree. Wear a helmet.
Wear a helmet. Get a good one. Make sure it has MIPS.
Two things about that.
Shoot.
One, I feel like helmet companies have done a good job of making helmets kind of cool looking for kids.
I used to look like Gazoo back in the day. You remember Gazoo?
Mine were so terrible. But I think the ones for kids look kind of cool now. Yeah. Some of them have like spiky hair and different things.
They're not bad.
Number two, I was really upset that you didn't call me so I could rush to the hospital to make sure you were okay.
I didn't go to the hospital.
I mean, I thought I would be like your emergency contact.
You are my emergency contact.
But since you didn't have to go to the hospital,
it wasn't an emergency.
Okay, fair enough.
Wear a helmet, kids.
Wear a helmet. All right, moving on. You wanted to talk about some explosives.
Moving on. So, I want to talk about the explosives and kind of the history of... So, this is going to turn a little bit of a history.
I love it. I love history.
Because I know you love history. So, what types of explosives are typically used? So, a lot of times they use dynamite. That's probably the number one used, other than RDX for steel, like you had mentioned. But where's dynamite come from? Dynamite comes from nitroglycerin.
What?
So nitroglycerin is a dense, colorless, oily explosive liquid most commonly produced by nitrating glycerol while white fuming nitric acid under conditions appropriate to the formation of nitric acid ester. Whatever that is, don't do that at home.
No.
Because apparently nitroglycerin is crazy unstable. Like it's like you drop it and it blows up kind of thing.
Okay.
Nitroglycerin, not dynamite. So nitroglycerin was one of the first practically used explosives that was stronger than black powder. So black powder is what is inside of bullets.
That blew up the church.
And all they would do is they would just kind of pack it in the thing and light it, and it wasn't super powerful.
Like one of those black cat firecrackers.
Yeah. So nitroglycerin was first synthesized by an Italian. Go figure.
They did a lot.
They do a lot of stuff. He was an Italian chemist back in 1847. His name was Ascencio Sobera. I nailed it, I'm sure.
I'm pretty sure.
And he was working for some university at the time, and he actually, and you hear this a lot about inventors, he actually warned against using this as an
I
explosive.
made this cool thing. You shouldn't use it.
I made this, and I'm sorry I made it kind of thing, but, so he warned against it. So, and here's where the fun facts, and this is so serendipitous, because friend of the show, Alfred Nobel, right?
Long-time listener.
So fun fact, nitroglycerin was later adopted commercially by Alfred Nobel, who experimented with safer ways to handle dangerous compounds after his younger brother, Elin, and several factory workers were killed in an explosion near Nobel's armament factory in 1864 in Sweden. And it was because they were dealing with nitroglycerin. It was unstable. Someone was, eating, some salmon lox over in Sweden for lunch, and they ran into some nitroglycerin and blew up the plant and killed his brother.
Yeah, that happened.
So, hence, dynamite was kind of invented. So basically, he was trying to find a way to stabilize nitroglycerin.
He was.
And nitroglycerin, crazy unstable. It blew up a part of the Wells Fargo building. Apparently, they shipped 3 crates in California to do some experimenting with the trains, that they were going to blow up some of the mountains to run train tracks, and it blew up a part of the Wells Fargo building. So they're like, yeah, no more dynamite. So he's trying to find out a way to make this more stable. So basically, he was combining different compounds with the nitroglycerin, and he finally found a compound that was super successful. He tried like sawdust and coal, and finally he found this thing called diatomacous earth. I have no idea.
Tobacco?
I'm sure I
like the
nailed
mix
it, but
between
basically,
tomato and tobacco?
it's basically fossilized algae, is the way it's described.
Okay, that's neat.
And it basically stabilized nitroglycerin, so you could transport it, but yet it still had all the same explosive capabilities.
For those of you who are more interested in Alfie Nobel, why don't you check out our episode that we did all about his life and times and inventions and how he came up with the Nobel Prize then.
Yeah.
And do you remember from that episode, he actually thought that dynamite was going to end war in the world because having the ability to blow up the other people's army, he figured would be such a deterrent that people would no longer have war. He was not correct on
So
that.
there's an interesting story about Alfred Nobel later in life. So as Alfred Nobel was on his deathbed, apparently nitroglycerin, people can take nitroglycerin. It helps with chest pain and all that sort of stuff. So apparently they called it something different. I don't remember what they called it specifically, but the story is he's on his deathbed. He's having chest pains. They give him nitroglycerin, and he tells his brother, his friend, or somebody, he's like, isn't it interesting that this invention that was used to, explode and kill and all that is now something that they just changed the name, and it's still just as dangerous, and people actually eat nitroglycerin. So
Comes
that was
full
kind of
circle.
interesting.
That
It
is.
does. And then he blew himself up whenever he bit too hard.
Is that what happened?
Yeah, his head right off.
I think that is accurate.
It is accurate.
Okay, a few big implosions that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I got one. That's all I got.
I
wanna hear
have,
yours.
so I think the one you're going to talk about was a big failure, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to talk about a couple successes here. First, the Kingdome in Seattle, home to the Seahawks and Mariners. I forget that the Mariners even exist.
What's that?
Baseball.
Field hockey team?
Yeah, field hockey team.
Okay.
So the stadium's March 2000 implosion was the largest building ever detonated or demolished by implosion at that time, with a volume of nearly 700,000 cubic feet.
Wow.
Yeah. Apparently the ceiling tiles were already falling down, so some of the work was done for them.
Okay.
This one's neat. K-25 in Tennessee. It was built as part of the Manhattan Project in 1943.
What? Check out our episode on the Manhattan Project, everybody.
Wow, it's almost like that's why I put this one in here. Yeah. So the K-25 gaseous diffusion building at the East Tennessee Technology Park had to come down. Probably was not full of good things that you want floating around. The AFE Tower in Germany. The 381-foot tall, built in 72 tower became the tallest building ever to be demolished using explosives when it came down in old Frankfurt, Germany.
Have you been to Frankfurt? I haven't been to Frankfurt. Is that the one with the ball at the top? It's a tower with a ball?
I don't know.
Okay.
It came down in 2014, though. They used 50,000, or it weighed 50,000 tons, and it was in the heart of the city, attracting over 10,000 onlookers on Explosion Day, which is a lot.
Yeah.
They put up a wall of 20 feet that ran around the site to help people from getting hit by debris. Those Germans and their walls, let me tell you.
I'm telling you.
Too soon?
Too soon.
Okay. Let's see. There's a number of other ones, but you know what? Let's talk about the fail that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, so opened in 1975, the Pontiac Silverdome was an engineering marvel when it was first built.
It was an engineering marvel.
But by 1990, it was a disgusting, nasty old building.
Cesspool.
Cesspool.
How do you like that?
It closed in 2006. It was reopened for a little while and then closed again back in 2013. And I remember seeing this. So they had it all walled off, and they had everything. They did all the things we talked about. And in 2017, the guy's sitting there holding the charger button and hits the other button, and it just went pew, 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 like 10 things went off, and then everybody's standing there like.
Did you watch the videos?
There's the
announcers,
the news commentators, like the local news commentators were like, "Oh yeah, there goes the Silverdome," and waiting for the next, and they just waited and waited and waited, and then eventually, how do you pull this straw? Who's the guy that has to get in the little white pickup truck when they don't know if this thing's going to continue to explode to drive up and see what's going on?
Right.
So I don't know who does that. So basically, they. What happened was only about 10% of all the explosives went off in the building, and they blamed some electrical misfire or function that happened with the building. And eventually, I think the next day, they rewired everything, hit the button, and blew up the rest of the building.
Yeah, I don't know how you get that short straw of, hey we're
James,
going to drive in and check stuff out.
Go see what's going on in there. Because you know how it is with a firework. You light a firework and it doesn't go. You just let it sit there. You never touch it.
No, you bury that thing.
Yeah.
It's gone. You know, of course the Lions are going to have some failure of an explosion, just like a failure of a football team.
Oh, look at you dogging
Boom,
on the Lions.
Detroit.
Sorry, Troy.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, Troy. Barry Sanders. That's all. Calvin Johnson.
That's it. I don't even know who that is, but Barry Sanders, yeah.
Yeah. Nothing. They got nothing.
Nothing.
All right. Well, that's everything I had for implosions.
This was great.
Here's what you do. You drill holes, you put in explosives, you blow stuff up.
Don't do it at home.
Don't do it at home. Leave it to the experts.
Wear helmets, kids.
I saw something, one fun fact that I guess I didn't say. Like I said, there's not a lot of companies that do this. There's no school to go to learn how to do this. You basically, get your education, then you go to work for one of these companies if you're really into it, and you just learn from watching them and working through it, and then you either stay on or you go off and start your own company doing this stuff. And it's super hard to get into because you don't have the experience still. So starting new companies was such a big problem.
But imagine that on your resume, though.
Right? Blew stuff up. Failed to blow up the Pontiac Silverdome. Boom.
Nailed it.
On that note, hopefully you learned something. If you have any ideas, write into unprofessionalengineering@gmail.com and let us know. And until next time.
See ya.